Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
On that morning, quite early, Bryce Montgomery crossed the hallway with his usual restrained demeanor. He was wearing his neatly ironed dress shirt, and with the calmness of someone who lives under control, he informed his wife that he would be away for the next 10 days on a business trip. Destination, the Caribbean. It was an international convention with meetings and presentations of results. As he spoke, Miranda watched him with the expression of someone who listened more out of politeness than interest. As soon as he finished, she simply replied with an "okay," without even looking away from her phone. There was no kiss, no question about the flight, no "have a good trip." Just a functional silence between two people who were already living parallel routines. Bryce didn't seem surprised by the coldness. He grabbed his suitcase, put on his coat, and left. Hours later, Miranda continued with her routine. The snowstorm from that week had partially blocked the garage, but she didn't bother to check if Bryce managed to leave with the car. Their marriage functioned like an ongoing contract, each fulfilling their role without much interference. He provided. She maintained the appearance of a respectable wife. And so the weeks piled up. Around 4 in the afternoon, Miranda's phone vibrated with a video call. It was Bryce. She hesitated for a moment before answering. When she touched the screen, she saw his face filling the image, and behind him, a brightly lit balcony with a view of a vibrant blue sea. He was in short sleeves, relaxed, with his hair slightly tousled by the wind. He smiled, but there was something distant about that smile. He said he had just arrived at the hotel, that the flight was smooth, and that he decided to call to let her know instead of just sending a message. He commented that the heat there was almost suffocating, but that he was looking forward to enjoying the commitments and perhaps some moments of rest. He wished her a calm week and, before hanging up, said he'd call from time to time. Miranda simply nodded in confirmation and ended the call. As she placed the phone on the table, her expression changed. Without rushing, she walked to the kitchen and grabbed a wine glass. She drank half of it in one gulp, left the glass in the sink, and returned to the bedroom. She opened the closet, chose an elegant dress, and, with her phone already in hand, dialed a number she knew by heart. It was the contact saved only with the initial N. The call was answered on the second ring. On the other end of the line, a deep voice responded. Miranda smiled with an almost provocative tone and asked if he was free for dinner that night. Nolan Pierce was a charismatic, successful man with a certain air of constant challenge. Married for over a decade, he maintained an impeccable image at the hospital where he worked as a surgeon. But for weeks, he had been having secret meetings with Miranda. They were calculated, reserved, and full of tension. Between them, there was something that bordered on a game, desire, danger, and especially the feeling that everything needed to remain hidden. And it was precisely this that made it all more exciting for her. That night, as she got ready in front of the mirror, Miranda seemed oblivious to the marriage she was leaving behind. Bryce's name didn't even cross her mind. It was as if he had become merely a formality. Each stroke of makeup was part of a character she herself had created. A comfortable role, where she could live as she pleased, as long as she kept appearances intact. The taxi arrived at the door. She got in and headed to the restaurant they had agreed upon. A discreet place, far from the center, where they could dine without the risk of running into acquaintances. During the ride, Miranda looked out the window, not to admire the scenery, but to mentally organize what she would say. That night wouldn't just be another meeting with Nolan. There were things she wanted to make clear, decisions she was about to make, or at least test reactions. Meanwhile, the city carried on with its rhythm. No one suspected what Miranda was about to reveal. And she, with her contained elegance and calculated gaze, was sure everything would remain under control. After all, Bryce was far away, isolated in a foreign country, and she was continuing her life plan down to the smallest detail. Nothing could go wrong, at least that's what she believed. Miranda arrived at the restaurant confident that she was in control. The maître recognized her and led her to the usual table, discreet, in the corner of the dining room. She sat down naturally, crossed her legs, took her phone out of her purse, and placed it on the table. Nolan arrived a few minutes later, wearing an elegant blazer and with his usual confident demeanor. He greeted her with a restrained kiss on the cheek, pulled out the chair, and seated himself across from her, adjusting the napkin on his lap. As soon as the waiter moved away, he asked if everything was okay. She responded with a slight smile and said she needed to talk. The appetizer had barely arrived when Miranda began speaking in a more intimate tone. She said she needed to confess something she had been keeping for years. She explained that, from the beginning, her marriage to Bryce wasn't based on love. She recounted that when they met, Bryce had just inherited a considerable fortune after the death of his parents. The loss shook him emotionally, but the money left him financially comfortable for life. He was a methodical, predictable man, someone who sought security above any intense emotion. And it was exactly that which caught Miranda's attention. At the time, she was going through an unstable phase. She needed a safe harbor. Bryce appeared with the stability she desired, and quickly they became a functional couple. But nothing beyond that. They got married within a few months, and the prenuptial agreement was drafted by his family's lawyers. Miranda revealed that she accepted everything without questioning, but soon realized the details of the contract. If he filed for divorce, she would be entitled to a significant portion of the assets. However, if she ended the marriage, she would leave with practically nothing. This transformed the relationship into a kind of chess game, where every move had to be calculated. Miranda then looked directly at Nolan and said, without hesitation, that she maintained the marriage out of convenience. Bryce offered a comfortable life, and she pretended to fulfill the role of a devoted wife. But over time, that routine began to suffocate her. She felt trapped in a life without enthusiasm. That's when Nolan appeared. An intense, direct man who stirred everything that Bryce had lulled to sleep inside her. She felt alive with him. The secret meetings, the hidden touches, the quick dinners filled with tension. It was as if every moment with Nolan reminded her that desire, daring, freedom still existed. She said this with a somewhat cynical smile, as if proud of her ability to keep everything hidden for so long. Nolan listened in silence, but his expression changed. He began to look at Miranda with a different posture, less enchantment, more caution. She continued, saying that she didn't expect him to leave his wife. That had never been part of the plan. She just wanted to live this while it was pleasurable, while it was exciting. She didn't want routine with him. She wanted the risk, the secret, the thrill of something that couldn't be exposed. It was at this point that Miranda touched on what motivated her most: control. She said that the secret was knowing how to balance. If she was careful, she could keep everything the way it was for years. Bryce, with his predictable life, would never imagine he was being betrayed. He didn't look for signs. He trusted too much. That made everything easier. She explained that she even avoided arguing or creating tension at home so he wouldn't have reasons to suspect. Men who are at peace don't ask questions, she said, looking Nolan in the eyes. Dinner ended colder than usual. Nolan seemed disconnected. He said he needed to return early, citing surgery in the morning. He gave her a hurried kiss on the cheek and left. Miranda stayed a few more minutes, taking the last sip of wine, staring at her phone, analyzing the conversation she had just had. She thought she had shown strength. That this night had made it clear who the mind behind everything was. That she remained in charge. But on the other side, someone was starting to see her with different eyes. And that would change everything. The days following the dinner were, for Miranda, like a gift delivered without questions. She enjoyed every second of Bryce's absence with a freedom she no longer pretended to hide, not even from herself. Nolan started coming to the house naturally, entering through the back, laughing quietly, walking through the rooms as if he belonged there. Miranda prepared drinks, chose music, lit candles, and served dinners that she had never offered her husband. They slept together in the guest room, and one night, Miranda dared to take him to the couple's bed. She said she wanted to break any memory that still lingered there. That for a few days, that space would truly be hers. They spent afternoons in silence, exchanging caresses and confidences, without fear of what might happen. Miranda even joked that it felt like being on vacation inside her own home. She played music as loud as she wanted, walked out of the shower wrapped in a towel without worrying about closing the door, and left wine glasses scattered around the living room without bothering to hide them. She had the sense that the world was suspended, as if Bryce had pressed a pause button before boarding. And she, finally, was living something she considered rightfully hers. On the morning of the 5th day, luckily, Miranda was alone at home. As she got out of the shower and wrapped her hair in a towel, she heard the sound of the front door opening. She thought it was the housekeeper, since she had left the key with her. She shouted, "Come in," from the hallway, still undressed. But the footsteps were different. Firmer. When she turned the corner, she froze. Bryce was there. He carried a black briefcase in one hand and wore a serene expression on his face. He looked at her without rushing, without surprise. For a moment, Miranda thought she was dreaming. Confused, she asked what he was doing there. Bryce replied that he had decided to come back earlier than expected. He said it as casually as if he were talking about the weather, with a disconcerting calm. He entered the living room, placed the briefcase on the table, and sat on the couch as if he had just stepped out to buy bread. Miranda ran to the bedroom, put on the first clothes she found, and returned, her face still damp. Bryce pointed to the briefcase and said there was something she needed to see. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside, there were printed messages, call records, photos, and even 2 recorded audio clips. Everything was detailed, with dates and times. Every outing with Nolan, every meeting, every movement during the past few days was there. Miranda flipped through the material, her face completely pale. Bryce waited for her to finish. Then he said he had hired a private detective even before the trip, but only during his absence did he have time to gather definitive evidence. As he spoke, Miranda's world unraveled with a silence that weighed heavier than any scream. Bryce explained that he needed certainty before making a decision. And now he had it. Without raising his voice, he stated that the prenuptial contract would lose its validity in light of proven infidelity. He had already initiated the process. And from that moment on, Miranda would no longer have any rights to his assets. He didn't insult her, nor did he question her. He simply informed her. He said everything would be resolved by lawyers, that the next steps were already defined, and that she could stay in the house for 2 more days until her lawyer contacted her. Miranda tried to argue, but her voice faltered. Bryce stood up, adjusted his shirt cuffs, picked up the briefcase, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned for a moment. He said he always knew something was off, but he preferred to believe it was just the wear and tear of time. But even predictable men, when betrayed, find strength in places no one imagines. And with that, he left. Miranda stayed there, alone, her body glued to the sofa, her gaze lost. Of everything she had lived through until then, she never imagined that the man she considered passive would be capable of reacting with such precision. For the first time in a long while, she felt fear. But not of scandal or exposure. She feared losing what truly sustained the life she had built with such calculation, the appearance of control. And now, the control was in his hands. The documents arrived the next day. Delivered with notarized signatures and all terms reviewed by experienced lawyers. It was a robust, impersonal, and definitive package. Miranda read each page with burning eyes. There was no room for negotiation. Bryce had tied up every point with surgical precision. The proven betrayal nullified the clauses of the prenuptial agreement. All the benefits she thought were guaranteed disappeared in a few lines of letterhead paper. Within a week, Miranda had to leave the house where she had lived for the past several years. The furniture didn't belong to her. The accounts were frozen, and the credit cards were cancelled. She had to pack her clothes in borrowed suitcases and accept help from a childhood friend who offered her a room in a two-bedroom apartment where she lived with her teenage son. There, sharing space with a boy she barely knew, Miranda began to feel the real weight of the consequences. It was the first time her elegant appearance didn't open doors. She was no longer seen as Mrs. Montgomery. She was just Miranda. And to many, that meant nothing. The social circles she frequented also closed off. Invitations to dinners, charity events, networking coffees, all vanished. No one said anything directly, but she noticed the sideways glances, the ignored messages, the empty excuses to cancel meetings. People who once praised her dresses now crossed the street to avoid her. She realized that the world she valued so much had silent rules. And whoever broke the protocol of perfection was left behind without ceremony. Seeking a final thread of security, Miranda reached out to Nolan. She called multiple times. When he answered, his voice was dry. He said his wife confronted him with prints and audio clips he never thought anyone had access to. The separation was inevitable. Although he didn't lose his position at the hospital, his reputation was severely damaged. Colleagues distanced themselves, and patients began requesting other professionals. Nolan kept working, but he was no longer respected as before. He was on autopilot, trying to hold on to what little remained. Even amidst this scenario, Miranda still tried to reconnect. She suggested meetings, said they could start over far away, that maybe everything that happened occurred for a greater purpose. Nolan listened but now clearly saw what he had previously ignored. He realized she only reached out because she had lost her footing. And more than that, she knew he still had money. Miranda used sweet words, but her eyes betrayed urgency, desperation, and interest. He distanced himself without explanation. He simply drifted away until she understood on her own. As everything crumbled around Miranda, Bryce moved forward. Months passed since their last conversation. After resolving all legal matters and putting a definitive end to what remained of that marriage, Bryce made a decision that surprised even his closest friends: he stopped working. He had enough money, the result of years of professional dedication and the inheritance he received from his parents. He realized he no longer needed to follow the pace of commitments and goals that once dictated his days. For the first time, he felt true freedom. He chose to live lightly. His new focus became traveling the world, exploring places, observing people, and experiencing things he had postponed in the name of stability. He transformed his routine into an open script. He traveled through big cities, small villages, islands. He immersed himself in different cultures, learned to savor time, and rediscovered parts of himself he had forgotten existed. His gaze became calmer, his laughter more spontaneous. And as the months went by, what was once pain turned into a resolved past. Until one ordinary morning, while waiting for a flight at the airport in his hometown, Bryce spotted someone familiar. It was Miranda. Sitting alone on a bench near the boarding gate, she was flipping through a manual with a badge hanging around her neck. When she saw him, she was visibly surprised but stood up and walked toward him with a shy smile, quite different from the haughty woman he once knew. There was something lighter in her face, less vanity, more humanity. They talked for a few minutes. She told him she had gotten a job in the administrative area of an airline. She mentioned that since she spoke a few languages, she ended up being hired to help with international support. She commented that the years she spent away from the job market had only hindered her life. It took her a while to understand that living off an image was like walking on thin glass. Finally, she looked him in the eye and apologized. Without beating around the bush. She simply said she regretted what she had done and hoped he was doing well. Bryce listened attentively. When she finished, he responded in a calm tone, "I'm glad you're doing well now. I wish you luck." With a simple gesture of farewell, he picked up his backpack, thanked her for the conversation, and went on his way. No resentment, no burden. Just with the certainty that sometimes, the true fresh start happens after everything fake stops making sense. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.